Hey y'all, it's your friendly neighborhood therapist, and today is February 6, 2025, so it is day 6 in our series of lesser known facts and lesser known people of the culture for Black History Month. Yes, I know I'm late. Better late than never. Now, shirt check. If y'all don't know, this is from Reading Rainbow, which was a educational TV show that aired in 1983 on PBS with host LeVar Burton, and it is still to this day the most watched television show in the classroom. Listen, reading is important, y'all, okay? Everything that I talk about, you can find in a book. And honestly, when they don't want us to know something, they put it in a book. I know we have the internet and I know we have information at our fingertips. However, books are still crucial, especially given that the average literacy rate in this country is at a sixth grade level. So make sure y'all reading out there. Read to your kids, read in your leisure time, read a book. All right, that's my little PSA. Now on to today's lesson. Okay, so you might be a little bit confused by the title today, which is The Illusion of Time. What I want to talk to y'all about real quick is the fact that we are not as far removed from the atrocity known as chattel slavery in this country as people would want you to believe. Now, I already hear some of my people saying, we ain't got to talk about slavery. Our history didn't start with slavery. We have more history than just that. Understood, but unfortunately, we can't ignore it either, and we don't need to forget it. Other cultures and other people groups do not ever forget the atrocities done to them. We are told in this country to never forget 9/11. Jewish people never forget the Holocaust. We need never forget what this country put us through because honestly, that history is why we experience a lot of the things we experience now because again, we are not that far removed. So what I want to do is give y'all some facts and people today to prove that none of this was that long ago. And given the current political administration, they're trying to make it that way again. That's all Make America Great Again means. Because I can't think of a time period where it was so great for Black folks and folks of color. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so this is the Clotilda. This is the last known U.S. slave ship to bring captives from Africa to the United States, and it arrived in Mobile Bay, Alabama, in autumn of 1859 or possibly early summer of 1860, with 110 African men, women, and children. Now, of course, U.S. involvement in the Atlantic slave trade had been banned by Congress through the Act Prohibiting Importation of Slaves, which was enacted on March 2nd, 1807, and effective January 1st, 1808. But the practice continued illegally. In the case of the Clotilda, the voyage's sponsors were based in the South and planned to buy Africans in Wada, Dahomey. After the voyage, the ship was burned and scuttled in Mobile Bay in an attempt to destroy the evidence. However, they found it. They found the wreckage. So the ship itself is not the important piece. I just wanted to give y'all that context of when the very last slave ship came into this country illegally. What I really want to focus on is three particular captive passengers on that ship. So first up is Cujo Kazula Lewis or Uluwale Kusola, born in or around 1841 and died July 17th, 1935. Y'all, my grandmother was born in 1933, just to give you time context. So, Kuzola was the third to last adult survivor of the Atlantic slave trade and was a captive passenger on the Clotilda. After the Civil War and emancipation, he and other members of the Clotilda group became free, and a number of them founded a community at Magazine Point, north of Mobile, Alabama. They were joined there by others born in Africa. Now designated as the Africatown Historic District, the community was added to the National Registry of Historic Places in 2012. In old age, Kosola preserved the experiences of the Clotilda captives by providing accounts of the history of the group to visitors, including Mobile artist and author Emma Langdon Roche and author, folklorist, and finer woman Zora Neale Hurston. Now, a real quick interesting fact about Africatown. Although only 3 miles from the town of Mobile, it was isolated and separated from the city by a swamp and a forest and easily accessible only by water. The development Africatown was a self-contained, independent Black community. The group appointed leaders to enforce communal norms derived from their shared African background. They also developed institutions including a church, a school, and a cemetery. Africa Town was unique because it was both a black town inhabited exclusively by people of African ancestry and an enclave of people born in another country. Black towns were safe havens from racism, but Africa Town was a refuge from Americans. Now, if you would like to learn more about Kusola, you can read Emma Langdon Roche's 1914 book, Historic Sketches of the South, or you can read Zora Neale Hurston's book, Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo, which was published in 2018 in an annotated edition. Next up is Ridoshi. She was born in 1948 and died in 1937. Again, my grandmother was born in 1933. She was a West African woman who was enslaved and smuggled to the U.S. state of Alabama as a girl in 1860 on the Clotilda. Upon being purchased by an enslaver, she was renamed Sally Smith, and she survived slavery and the imposition of Jim Crow laws during the post Reconstruction era of disenfranchisement and lived into the Great Depression. She lived long enough to become acquainted with people active in the civil rights movement. Illusion of Time. She is the only known female transatlantic slavery survivor to have been filmed and to have been interviewed for a newspaper. So you can literally see Ridoshi's face in a film. Someone who was a captive on a slave ship is on a film. Illusion of Time. Now, one interesting thing about Ridoshi is that when she was captured in what is now present day Benin, two of the Dahomey warriors who had kidnapped her and her kinfolk were also taken captive after boarding the ship. They boarded the ship to mock the captives and didn't notice when it set sail until being told by the captain that they too were going to be transported to America and be slaves. They worked right alongside Ridoshi in the fields, and she never forgave them. Now, last up is Matilda McCreer. She was born in or around 1857, and she was born Abake. She was the last known survivor in the United States of the transatlantic slave trade, and she too was a captive passenger on the Clotilda. She died January 13th, 1940. My grandmother was 6 years old in 1940. She was a Yoruba who was captured and brought to Mobile, Alabama at the age of 2 with her mother and older sister. The girls were sold away from their mother and never reunited. Together with other American slaves in territory not occupied by the Union in the South, Matilda was granted freedom by the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. She and her family did not achieve freedom, though, until after the de jure abolition of slavery in 1865. She continued to be a sharecropper as an adult and had a family of 14 children with a white German born American common law husband. She died in Selma, Alabama. McCreer's life became publicly known through research by Hannah Durkin of Newcastle University, published in 2020. One interesting fact about Matilda is that because she was a member of the Yoruba people, she did receive traditional facial scars, which were visible the rest of her life. In her 70s, she also made a legal claim for compensation for her enslavement, which was dismissed. And according to Durkin, she appears to have continued to have worn her hair in a traditional Yoruba style all her life. Now, last but not least, this last person was not on the Clotilda, but I'm using her as a further example that this atrocity of chattel slavery was not that long ago. I know we often hear people say, well, I don't know any slaves and I don't know any slave owners. That was so long ago. None of those people are still living, which at this point might be true. Let's be clear, might be true. And I say might because of Elizabeth Cash Green. Now, in this photo, this gentleman is holding a photo of her. I could not find a photo of this woman. However, she was born June 2nd, 1862, in what it is claimed to be Midland, Georgia. She moved to Arkansas in 1882, and she died in Helena, Arkansas on February 20th, 1975. Y'all, my mother had been on this earth for some years by 1975. 1975 was only 50 years ago. In fact, we are coming up on the 50th anniversary of her death on February 20th. So, yes, there are people walking the earth right now who knew this woman, who talked to her. She died in 1975, y'all. 50 ain't that old. So, if she died in 1975, then you know that there were slave owners who died later as well, right? Or at least the children of slave owners. There are people who resided in this country with her whose parents owned slaves. Therefore, it is quite possible that your grand or great grandparents were a part of the slave trade and owned slaves. So we got to stop saying that this was so long ago when the last surviving person born into chattel slavery died in 1975. This is why we cannot forget. This is why it's important to talk about this history, because how many people knew that the last surviving person of chattel slavery died in 1975? The illusion of time, y'all. It was not that long ago. And quite frankly, it feels like there are a lot of people who want to go back there. And the reason why they have that mindset is because that mindset was passed down to them by their grandmama. You take the current president of the United States, he is damn near 80, or is he 80? I don't know. I don't really care about that man, but he's somewhere up in them late 70s and 80s. It is very possible that his grandparents could have been slave owners. Now, they likely weren't because they weren't from this country, but that's neither here nor there. The point is to point out the illusion of time. All right, y'all. I hope y'all have a beautiful, wonderful rest of the day. And look out for day 7 in our series of lesser known facts and lesser known people of the culture in just a little bit.